Edwards on the drive, goes inside the floater. Turn him over again. Booker scoops it up. Booker brings the boom.
Rum Pure Sports Hardwood show is back live on the YouTube channel here. My guy DC, two-man booth, bringing you some NBA winners. DC, we were just talking pre-show about how our night ended, unfortunately, early due to the Boston Celtics and my guy Kristaps Porzingis getting ruled out after lock, which is really fun. Just absolutely a joy to do all the work, the content. Obviously, Porzingis was, one of my favorite plays on the slate. So I had him on most of my, all of my teams, and it did not go over well. I was very unhappy, and I just kind of closed the laptop and watched the games in peace without worrying about my DFS lineups. But it's always fun when your night gets, finished early.
Yeah. Normally I try to at least make it to the tip of the first game before my teams are completely dead. But not last night. Did have Wemby on both my main teams on both sites. Or not Wemby. Porzingis.
You would have been dead if you played Wemby too, but yeah.
And that wasn't a lot of fun getting ruled out before the first game of the night even started. But hey, we've been playing DFS long enough to have experienced this more than a few times, probably like hundreds of times. So
it's definitely not the first time that this has happened. I'll say that. So
it's not
my favorite. It's when you get like the news, like, so it's like 7:09, the game's about to tip, and then all of a sudden, like, a beat writer's like, hey, this is what happened, and he's out now and stuff. It's like, oh, thank you after the news comes out and stuff. It's like, appreciate your tweet. That doesn't help, but that's
Thanks,
always
Kevin.
good.
He was a bad play anyways. He says he saved our computer power for the night. Thanks, Mr. Falk. Really appreciate that on this Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for joining.
I mean, the needle was, there's no need for the needle there, Kevin. I mean, it's already tilting enough. We don't need your fucking bad advice here.
And we're never going to find out, right? We'll never know. So there's no need to come in with that negativity, Kevin.
Bad mojo right there, K Fallic. Bad mojo from K Fallic. It's unlike him too, but that's all right. We'll get it back here. Appreciate it. Yeah, got a cut this morning. Appreciate that. And he got 0 points. Yeah. He did. I'm about to ban your ass, K Fallic. Say one more word about Porzingis, and I'm banning you. That's it.
Hey, well, you can play him tonight. It might be a pretty good play tonight, depending on who's out for Boston. So you can go back to the well.
I am going to be super tilted when I don't play him tonight, and he goes for like 50-something fantasy points, and I'm like, oh, screw this. This is crap. So DC, I do love it though, how like they still put the non-COVID illness injury tag. Do you notice that with some of like the media people when they post their tweets and stuff, they'll write like non-COVID in parentheses, like after illness and stuff. It's like, why are we doing that? Who cares? Like, if he's sick, he's sick. Okay. If he's got COVID, he's got COVID. Like, what does it matter? Like, I just think it's funny that we're still doing that.
Surprised those people are still on X. It seems like they take the blue sky with the non-COVID illness.
No, you didn't see the polls. It's like 50-50 now on X. It's like it's split down the middle from some of the polls I saw. So I don't know if that's true, but that's just from the polling. It was almost a split. So I don't know. We don't have to get into that. I just thought it was funny that people are still non-COVID illness when the guy
should not get into that. Yeah, probably a good idea.
You never know. This chat could be 60-40. I don't know which way, but it could be. But that's all right. We'll leave that for the chat goers and the professional media people to continue letting us know if they have COVID or not. We appreciate you anyways. for letting us know the news after it already happened.
Yes.
Whatever.
The other kick of the ball before we move on, the underdog. You didn't really need to tweet at halftime after Porzingis had played 0 minutes. I didn't need
to ruled out.
I rolled up a J, went to the dog park, kind of unwind, and then I get the freaking alert on my phone from Underdog that no, Porzingis has been ruled out for the game at halftime. It was one last kick in the nuts, JSU, before we officially moved on to Wednesday.
I forgot that happened, but I remember when it happened, and then you just reminded me, and it just made me even more mad about it. It's just from remembering that happened at halftime. I do remember it too, so appreciate it. Appreciate Phallic in the chat letting us know he was a bad play anyways. And we move on. We move on to today's slate. 9 games on today's slate here, 7 o'clock to 9:30 here. So a long window, DC, bunch of games locking, at 7. You got a 7:30 game, an 8 o'clock game, and then a 9 and a 9:30 game. So it'll be interesting from a news standpoint. Yesterday, we got my guy, Bull. I feel like whenever I do this show, somehow Bull ends up starting for the Phoenix Suns when no one expects it. And he ends up starting yesterday, has a pretty good game. That game obviously went crazy. So it didn't matter that I had him because obviously the Porzingis thing, but you see my guy Bull, maybe they went back. They decided, oh no, maybe Bull is the right guy to play with the starters in Phoenix.
Bull, it's impressive to have no matter who's in or out, Bull somehow has a range of 0 to 60 fantasy points on any given night. He could, if you told me when we were doing the show yesterday that he got a DNP, I would have been like, okay, I could see that happening. But instead he starts and goes absolutely nuclear.
And that's the thing with those type of players is they could sometimes not play. And then they could sometimes start and give you, 35 or 40 or whatever. He had 38 last night. That's the best parts of guys like Bull. And then when everyone's on him, DC, and he's mega chalk the next slate, he's going to go for 20. That's just what's going to happen. Everyone's oh, he's starting again, and he's going to be 60% owned, and he's going to go for 20, and then he'll go for 60. It's a up and down effect with Mr. Bull, but I did enjoy watching it. I did enjoy watching it just as a fan of Bull because I am rooting for him, even though I know he, his flaws and stuff like that. I am rooting for him.
Once the Porzingis news hit, there was roughly a 0 chance I was turning on any NBA for the rest of the evening. So I left the Bull sweating to you.
I still watched it. I bet my boy Peyton Pritchard over on points, rebounds, and assists. So I think
we got the super boost, the late night super boost from the
we got the super boost. Yeah. I forgot about the super boost. So, and we talked about it on this show. So hopefully some of you guys rode with us on the old super boost. LeBron, Luka, Kyrie to get 77 plus points combined, which they did. It didn't happen the way we thought it was, DC. We thought Luka was going to be the guy going for 35. It was ended up that Kyrie was actually the man who went for.
Listen, I didn't at that point. I didn't care how it cashed. Kyrie could have scored all 77 points himself. I would have been just as satisfied. I just get me out of that Porzingis hole. Thanks, guys, in the late game.
Yep, appreciate you, DraftKings, for that nice super boost there, and hopefully. We get another one for the next game, for the next Luka in Dallas game that we'll see next, hopefully. So I can't wait for that. But all right, DC, back to this slate here. Like I said, 9 games, some pretty good spots too. This slate, I feel like is going to be a little different than last slate. This slate, there's a lot of guys that are questionable, DC, some good players that are questionable too that, we got to kind of wait on. We'll probably get some news as the show hits, but we're definitely going to get news as the slate goes on. So I think this is one where you're not going to want to go too far away from your computer, at least, between now and 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice in general. And I mean, that's most nights for the NBA, right? I will say though, JSU, this slate, those first 4 games, we'll talk about them obviously as we go along here. they all look like pretty good to me. At least one side of them in all cases. And this could be a slate where you get off the big T 777, right? You're off to the races early. Talk about Portland, who I think is pretty interesting here against the Wizards, but it should be a fast and furious start to the slate. And then what do we have? We've got 2 7:30s and 8. Yeah. And then it kind of gets spread out there at the end. So should be a fun one. Looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of these games are pretty good games, DC. There's only like 2 that I really don't love. And then there's a couple that I could make the case to like be out on, obviously. But I think this is going to be a pretty good slate. And we'll get to Mr. Sharp, who is going to be pretty popular for Brooklyn. But let's start with Portland and Washington. You brought it up. This is one of those games, DC, starting us off. At least the Portland side. I mean, you said you like at least one side of every game. I assume you definitely like the Portland side. The Washington side, I think, is a little tougher to honestly love here with, some of the guys they got. Middleton, they're not playing full run, but they're playing them like 25 minutes. They had Marcus Smart last game. He got run, played 22 minutes last game. DC, I don't know how much I love Washington, but I do think these Portland guys are interesting. You got Denny, Anthony Simons. Toumani Camara has been really good. His game is definitely growing. I think he's kind of interesting as a tournament play. Donovan Clingan at 5'3". What are you doing with Portland?
Yeah, starting with Washington side, I agree with you there. I think a pretty tough team to get to on this slate. Just better options to go to. You can't trust the minutes really for any of these guys. I do think you could play certainly Jordan Poole, who's had plenty of big games throughout the season. Again, very volatile and, more risk of a complete dud than you want at 7-3, but he also does have, I think, legit 50-plus fantasy point upside here and in most matchups. So I think Jordan Poole is fine if you want to go there. And then the other guy I do think is fine as well is Rashawn Holmes, who should start at center with Sarr out, with Valanciunas traded. What does he put up? Like 30, right around 30 fantasy points in each of the last 2. Played, pretty much exactly 30 minutes in each of the last 2. I would expect something similar. And, 30 fantasy points at 4.9K, if that's what he does, isn't bad. So I do think you can consider those guys for the Wizards, but I wouldn't go too crazy on that side. But the Portland side, pretty interesting. I mean, they're kind of making a playoff push here, right? Is Portland. So it's been a team that has been kind of, in a little bit of rebuild mode. The minutes have kind of been all over the place. I kind of think they've been trying to figure out, what are their true pieces going forward. But the team they have right now, JSU, these guys kind of like looked locked into their minutes. I mean, look at the last game they played, and they have essentially the same guys. I think actually the exact same guys available for this game that they had last game. And in that one, I mean, Jeremy Grant played 38 minutes, Simons 37, Avdia 36, Kamara 36, Scoot 30, right? So they kind of, it looks like, kind of settled on the guys they really believe in. You could maybe throw in Clingan. He didn't close that game. They went with Scoot off the bench over Clingan to close, but I do think he's interesting too, with a pretty easy matchup himself, right? Rashawn Holmes, not a guy that you're at all worried about defensively, and then you can clean up on the glass against the Wizards. So I would throw Clingan into the mix, which for me brings, I think there are 6 Wizards in play. The 5 starters, Simons, Kamara, Avdia, Grant, and Clingan, and then Scoot off the bench, I think is a pretty solid play. Probably going to play 25, 30 minutes, maybe garbage time too, if Portland takes care of business. And none of these guys, I mean, the most expensive one is what? Simons at 6,700. You've got Avdia at 6,500. So you've got, well, looks to me like secure matchups, secure minutes, great matchup, a team that's motivated to win, and, moderate price tags on these guys. So I like Portland a lot. My favorites, I have Avdia 1, Simons 2, Kamara 3, Scoot 4, Klingon 5, and Grant 6. But again, I like all these guys quite a bit, and it's kind of a question for me of how many I want to play in any one individual lineup. But I think maybe 2 to 3 of these guys could end up on my main lineup GSU. Pretty high on Portland to kick this slate off.
Yeah, Phallic, of course, you named like 7 guys from this game that you could potentially play, and Phallic's happy that you left off his favorite Washington guy, Keyshawn George, who he thinks is the safest play at 5K. And I'll say this, Phallic, I'll leave Keyshawn George to you. 5K Keyshawn George. I mean, I wouldn't call it safe. I mean, the minutes maybe, I guess, but I don't know if I'd call Keyshawn George safe. But then again, that's Kevin for you. Also, bumps to Kevin. He's too busy. He's a busy man. If you want to talk to Kevin, you're gonna have to get in the Run Pure Sports Discord, because I mean, the guy is just too busy to be on these shows right now. He's got a lot going on. So if you want K Phallic, you gotta get in the Discord, because that's where you're gonna find K Phallic. I'd love to have him on a show. He knows he can come on a show whenever he wants, but busy man K Phallic is. In terms of this game here with Portland, I mean, I agree. I'm going to kind of slim it down a little bit from you. You said there was like 6 guys that you could play. I'm going to try and make the case for a couple of these guys, though. Like, definitely, I think Denny and Simons are both in play at those price tags, 6,500 and 6,700. Clearly, to me, the 2 guys with the biggest ceilings on the Portland team right now. And then after that, I think, you brought up Scoot. I don't know if you brought up Jeremy Grant. You might have said he's in play.
Too, yep. Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'll say about Jeremy Grant is, like, my issue with someone like Jeremy Grant is he played 38 minutes, pretty much had like, he shot 5 for 10 from 3. He scored 20 points and had 36 fantasy points. It's like, yeah, that's fine. I mean, like, I wish he did a little more in the other columns other than scoring. Because when you're shooting 10 threes and you're making 5 of them, you're scoring that much, you'd like to see a little bit of a bigger game. I think someone like Toumani Camara is maybe not similar in like the scorer that Jeremy Grant is, but I think he does a little bit more in all the other columns. So if he does have a big scoring game, he's going to put up more fantasy points, and they're almost the same price. So I think Jeremy Grant is safer. It's almost like what K Phallic was saying with Keyshawn George. He feels like Keyshawn George is a safe play and watch. I feel like Jeremy Grant is like the safe play DC for Portland. I don't think he's going to kill you. Now, I don't know if he's going to be the top 2 or 3 scorer for Portland from a fantasy perspective, though. I think that's going to be Simons, Denny, and Camara in some order. So those are the 3 guys that I like personally. I can make the case for Scoot. I think, from a tournament perspective, I do think Scoot might be a little bit of a better tournament play than Grant. Klingon, I wish the minutes were better. I also wish he was more aggressive offensively, but he's really not.
He's like a putback guy is all really is right now. So
that's what he's been doing is mainly just like the putbacks and stuff. And that's why you see the low, field goal attempts. You know what I mean? It's because that's mainly what he's doing. But the rebounding numbers are really good when the minutes, are there, when he's getting 25, plus minutes. So, he's someone I would leave in the pool. If you're playing 20, 150, I'd leave him in there. But I think the 3 guys I like are those top 3, Camara, Avia, and Simon. So those are 3 guys. Washington, I'm probably not going to get to any of these guys in my 3 builds. I do think Rashawn Holmes is in play. And I do think you can leave Poole in the pool in tournaments. But other than that, I'm probably not getting to him in my 3 lineups. So that's Portland, Washington. Only people who wear condoms play Grant. Run like I agree with you. That's perfect. I should have said that. Shame on me for not actually saying those or that statement when I was talking about Jeremy Grant, but that's exactly what I mean. Let's go to the Boston-Detroit game, the game that I really want to get through talking about because I don't want to even bring up any more Kristaps Porzingis talk. But DC, he's questionable. I feel like he's going to play.
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown's also questionable. I don't know if he's going to play. Drew Holiday and Al Horford are back for this team. So it's not like they're missing everyone from last game, plus potentially one or two more guys. But they could be down a couple of bodies. Again, Sam Hauser also questionable, depending on how this news goes. So I think this game is more news dependent.
Yeah, that makes sense. When Boston lists multiple guys questionable, like they are tonight, right? We've got Hauser, Porzingis, Jaylen Brown questionable. It does seem like they usually sit one of them at least, and then like maybe more than other teams. It does seem like Boston kind of has a plan who's going to sit. They don't tell us until they have to, but I bet they know or have a very good idea who's going to get a night off here. My guess would be Jaylen Brown, if I had to guess amongst these guys to sit out. But again, just a guess. We don't know that for sure. Obviously, Boston is a team that plays a really tight rotation. If they're missing pieces or multiple pieces, the remaining players all get bumped. So it's going to be used to pay attention to as we get closer to lock. If it is Jaylen Brown that sits, certainly a nice bump to Tatum. Could look to a Derek White. I mean, truth be told, if Porzingis plays, he is a pretty good play here. I think, again, at 7,900. Don't know if I'm going to have the intestinal fortitude to go back to Mr. Porzingis myself, but I do think statistically definitely a good play. So, yeah, Boston, again, depends who's in or out, but certainly a team not to completely overlook. I'm not planning to get on a bunch of Detroit or any Detroit as of now, unless you could maybe talk me on someone. I mean, obviously, I haven't made all my decisions, but this is mostly a team I don't see myself playing. But, Boston, they don't play quite the defense that their, reputation kind of like they're capable of it, but it's just not a nightly thing with them. So it's not like Detroit has a super low team total or anything like that. So you could certainly play guys like Cade if you wanted to. I like the Portland guys way better, and then obviously pretty big slate as well.
Yeah, it's a big slate. I do think that Cade, if you were trying to make the case for someone, it would be Cade probably in this spot. 10-5 on a slate where, let's be honest, DC, the studs are kind of lacking. You don't got the Giannis's, the Lukas, no LeBrons. Cade's one of the top tier guys, and he's been playing really good. The matchup may not look like it, but at the same time, 2 games ago going for 76, 58 last game against the Clippers. Cade can get it done even in a tough spot. So I do think he'd be the one Detroit guy. And like I said, from Boston, I think it's just going to mainly come down to this news, man. If all these guys are in, I'm going to be lighter on Boston. I do agree with you, though, that it feels like they're set up to be missing one of, Brown, Porzingis type thing. Because I do think this is strategic, from what they did last night. Now Drew and Al are back. And now it might be Jaylen Brown's turn to maybe have a rest day or Porzingis or both if Porzingis is still sick or whatever. So we'll see on that. If they're out, like I said, I'll probably have some interest in some of these guards. But if they're all in or most of them are in, probably be lighter on the Boston side too. So yeah, by the way, Jason Tatum, another double-digit assist game, just racking up those assists. So I love seeing that from Mr. Tatum. But from the DFS standpoint, I think we need news before we really get in on that game. So maybe we'll get it during this show. But Dustin, appreciate it. I'll refer you to my barber. Shout out Lamboy's Barbershop, my guy Jason. And let's see, K Phallic. Oh boy, I don't know if I can't read all that, Phallic. I'm sorry. I saw LOL and Grant, and I'm just not going to read the rest of that. It's too long. So give me the bullet points, and I'll read it out loud. All right, DC. Next game here: Toronto and Indiana. Pacers at home. Toronto on the back end of a back-to-back. Scotty Barnes, Halliburton, both questionable for this game. This is another game where, News is going to play a big deal. Grant is a good play. And that's all you had to say. Why didn't you just say that, Phallic? Okay. That's all you had to say. Phallic wears condoms. You got a couple kids now, so I get it, Phallic. If you start wearing them again, that makes some sense. But back to this game, if Scotty Barnes is out, DC, like RJ Barrett, quickly, they're going to look like really good plays, I think, if Scotty Barnes is out. And it's kind of similar on the Halliburton side. If Halliburton's out and maybe McConnell's in, it's going to make Nembhard and McConnell probably really good plays.
Yeah, you nailed it with this one. I mean, that's the two kind of key pieces for each of these teams. Especially Halliburton for Indiana is clearly the kind of the main guy, right? The guy that makes that team go, the orchestrator of the offense. So for Indiana, if Halliburton's out, and like you said, McConnell also questionable. If both those guys sat, Nembhard, I assume, would become maybe the best play on the whole slate. If both McConnell and Halliburton were out, I think Neesmith would become really, really interesting at that point. Mathurin would get a big bump, Siakam. So, yeah, got to pay attention to Indiana. And then Toronto, kind of the same thing, right? If Barnes misses, Quickly and Barrett, I think, become the two guys that really have to carry this offense. Grady Dick at 4K, I think, would become a really solid play as well. Again, this is all assuming that Barnes misses. But, yeah, potentially an awesome game here, or one that, if Barnes and McConnell and Halliburton are all in, a game that I don't necessarily love. So it is really going to depend on those stars. I see you laughing at something. I assume it's the chat. Must have something.
Gosh, trying to hold it in, DC. I couldn't help myself here. Ricky K with the Mangone wears condoms when it's time to beat the meat. No Diddy. Gotta add the last part, Ricky. Nice, great comment there by Ricky K. Yeah, I mean, DC, anything else, finishing out? Sorry, I did interrupt you as you were finishing off.
No, it just depends on Halliburton and Barnes. But, I mean, if they're both out, this game becomes awesome, right? You can play kind of the remaining studs on both teams for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even guys like, Miles Turner, I think all these guys kind of become better plays. I'm definitely the Toronto big situation is the one situation where I'm just going to probably stay away from in general, like who they start at center on this type of slate that we have, where I think we're going to have a ton of good options, and I think we're going to have value to DC. So I don't think we're going to be, needing to stretch on some of this, bad value that could pop up as a starter or something like that. But like you said, like the main guys, and then I definitely think the guards for the Pacers are the key points. So, that's where I want to stick to with the Pacers, probably the guards. And then, like, I think one of Miles Turner or Siakam with the guards, DC, I think are kind of a good pairing, because, guys like TJ, if he's getting there, he's probably bringing one or two guys with him, just the way he plays. You know what I mean? He gets a lot of people involved, playmaking. It's not just a scorer or anything like that. So, I think it's a couple of these guys. And Toronto, they play tough, man. I know Scotty being out, but I mean, they covered. It was kind of It was a great cover. I bet Toronto. I'm not going to lie, and I feel lucky with the cover. I don't know if you watched the last play, DC, but quickly went in for a layup and they blocked it, but it hit the backboard first, so they counted the bucket. So we got the cover by a point. Hit 10. The spread was 11. So I did feel pretty lucky and also happy with my cover there.
What do you mean? It was goaltending. That layup was going in. It was a great.
That's
pick.
true. That's true. So it was a good bet,
Yeah.
not a lucky bet. It was a good bet. In my head, I thought good, but I'll give it a little lucky too. But either way, Toronto's just one of those teams that I've been saying this, like they just play hard. They play hard and they're trying. You know, I like them more at home, DC. I'm not gonna lie. But on the road in Indiana, back to back, it's the only thing I'm worried about is the back to back on the road after playing Boston and playing them tough too. You know what I mean? Like keeping the game somewhat close for most of the game. It's the only thing that worries me. But if this news it does come out to where both these guys are out, I think it's a good game. If one of them is in DC, does that kind of lower your interest, even if the other's out? How do you see that?
I mean, looking at this Toronto roster, if Barnes is out, like they have essentially three guys that can score quickly, Barrett, and to some extent Grady Dick as well. They have like no other offensive punch really on the whole roster, especially when you get to kind of the bigger men, like they're just rebounding types. So yeah, if Barnes is out, I'm going to have interest in Toronto regardless of what happens with Indiana. And honestly, I would say that's true on the other side as well. If Barnes plays but Halliburton sits, absolutely going to have some interest in the Indiana backcourt as well. So just got to wait on those guys. Thankfully, first game set of the night, so we will have that information.
Yeah, QS talking about asking if he can fade the early games. Honestly, I think some of these early games are pretty good games. Just we've gone through three of them right now. We still got one more to talk about, but
I would say
at least two of them so far seem pretty good to me.
Yeah, things could change between now and lock, but I would be really surprised if I didn't have multiple pieces from the early games, kind of as it stands right now, at least.
Now, if you're someone who makes multiple lineups, you can always backload one lineup. I talk about this all the time. Like if you're someone that builds three lineups, which is normally what I do most days, you can always save one of those lineups, and just see what happens, because you never know in the NBA when there's just a late scratch or a bowl that no one expected to be in the starting lineup. And then all of a sudden he's in and you feel like, oh man, he would have been, 65% owned if we knew about it, but he was only like 25% owned because it came in kind of later in the, slate. So I definitely think there's always a reason to make a case to fade games. But like, if you're someone who builds one lineup, DC, I feel like these early games are pretty good games.
Yeah, 100%. I think most people are going to want to have pieces of these early games for sure.
Yep. All right, last 7:00 game here. Philly in New York. Another game, another big questionable here with Cat, 10-1. Like I said, not many of the big studs on this slate. Cat's, one of the better, big names on this slate from a spend-up standpoint, going up against Philly, who's also for sure going to be down a bunch of bigs. No Joel Embiid, no Yabusele. So we're going to see Drummond and Adem Bona. DC, what are we doing here? First off with Philly, with all these bigs out.
I mean, the first question with Philly, I guess, is to whether or not people are going to play Drummond, right? Who does, at least projection-wise, rate out pretty well as we stand at the moment. I really haven't played Drummond like all year long, even when he's been chalky or looks like a good value. Just the ceilings have not really been there. I mean, he's got just a couple 30-plus fantasy point games on the season, even though, Embiid has missed most of the year. He does have back on, well, it was back in October. He did play 37 minutes, so he does have some games where the minutes get up there. And, you know, given who the backups are for Philly, JSU, it's possible Philadelphia leans on Drummond and asks him to turn back the clock for one night here and go play 30-plus minutes, which probably makes him a good play at 4K, but makes me nervous, honestly. Drummond does. Just so old and, kind of one-dimensional. But, yeah, I do think Maxey is fine at 9,300. I don't think I'm going to get there myself. And then Paul George and Oubre are okay too, but I'm probably not going to end up on a ton of Philly. Obviously, partly depends on what the Knicks end up doing. As you mentioned, Towns is questionable. Full fade on Philly. Yeah, I'm just not playing that much Philly either, or I'm trying not to anyway. I assume Towns will play here, JSU. I mean, they've had a couple days off. He played 41 minutes last time out against Boston on the 23rd. He's been playing well. It's a knee injury that's not, it's not a serious knee injury. So I don't know. I kind of think he'll be out there. Towns plays most games. Tibbs isn't resting guys just to rest them. So kind of got to think Towns is a little sore, but most likely is out there tonight. If he's out there, this game becomes, I think, much easier to avoid. If he's out, though, it is a bump to Drummond as well, right? Like he could, I think, have his way maybe with the interior of the Knicks defense if Towns is out. And if Towns is out, Josh Hart, I think, is the guy that you most want to look at. We've seen some huge games from 60-plus fantasy points when Towns sits. So Hart would be the guy that I would be most wanting to get into my lineup from the Knicks if Towns sits. But again, I do expect Towns to be in there tonight.
Yeah, I do think he plays too. I agree with you on Josh Hart. I think Precious would get a bump as well with no Towns. But I also agree with like the Drummond thing too, because like if you're less worried about someone like Cat out there getting him in foul trouble and stuff like that, like for me, like that's what I kind of worry about with Drummond. I think if there's no foul trouble, I think he plays like mid-20s minutes and he covers his price tag in mid-20s minutes. But, how he cannot cover his price tag is if he's not playing those minutes and he's getting in foul trouble and stuff like that. Cat's pulling him away from the basket, which he's going to do, right? Because Cat likes to play out on the perimeter a lot. And yeah, I mean, that's what he's going to want to do. And we want Drummond under the basket, right, DC? We want him getting those rebounds. we want him racking up those rebounds. So
yeah, we don't want Drummond venturing too far away from the basket.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for telling everyone what I already said, which was that you could backload, especially if you play a couple lineups. But appreciate you, Kevin, for the short version of your long version. On the Philly side, though, the one guy I do think is interesting for tournaments is Quentin Grimes, back to New York, DC, where he started. I think he's a fun play, and I know he didn't get there last game, but the last game against Chicago was just a weird game. I mean, they got whooped. He left with a knee injury in like the third quarter, didn't come back. I think it was more maintenance. I think it was more like they were getting their ass kicked and they started pulling guys and he was just like, my knee's sore. I'm going to go back to the locker room. Like, we're not coming back or whatever. But I do think for tournaments, he's a fun little play here in New York. And I probably won't play Paul George, but he did look a little better last time out. I do think it's funny that he's taking time away from his podcast, DC. He's finally taken time away to focus on basketball. Huh? That's interesting. So
why do you even have a podcast if you're Paul George and you've made like $200 million? Like this.
I think that's like where all these players are sick and tired of like just these random guys that they feel like don't know basketball talking about basketball, especially probably like the media too. So they want to get like their voice out, So Draymond's doing his thing. And then Paul George is like, I can do that. but I could like do it more chill than Draymond. And, like, I'll do my thing. And you're just going to see it with all these guys eventually. They're up. Micah, I know it's football, but Micah Parsons has got his, podcast and stuff. It's like all these guys are going to end up doing it. So yeah, they just, they want to talk the talk with their ball knowledge. They want to show everyone their hoops knowledge. So
Paul, if you're watching, you are not welcome on this show. You've screwed too many of my teams.
Yeah, you're dead. You're dead to us at Run Pure Sports, Paul. Okay, get your shit together.
Welcome on this podcast. Start your own, Paul.
Yeah. Oh God. I mean, I think it's funny that it took him halfway through the season to be like, you know what? I should focus on hoops, DC. I should really focus on what I'm getting paid millions of dollars to do, which is play basketball.
Have you ever listened to the Paul George podcast yourself, JSU?
I have not. I've only seen clips. So I couldn't tell you exactly what they're talking. I assume they're talking hoops on there, but I've only seen clips. So have you listened to it?
No.
Yeah, no, I've just seen the clips. So
that won't be happening anytime soon.
All right, chat. Let me know if it's a good podcast to listen to. I like podcasts. I'll listen to podcasts, but I'm not just pulling up Paul George's podcast. I'll say that. It's not like the first podcast that comes to mind, DC, when I'm about to, hit a workout or go for a run. I'm like, let me pull up what Paul George is saying here on a Tuesday. He's definitely
bragging about his once again putting up 32.25 fantasy points
in a loss where they got dominated by the way, a side note on this whole thing, but Josh Giddey destroyed Philly in that game. Like he made Philly look silly. And it wasn't just on offense, on defense. He was moving his feet on defense. He was blocking shots. DC, I thought I was seeing things. I was like, so wait, is Josh Giddey all of a sudden really good at defense, or is Philly just absolute trash right now? I couldn't figure it out.
We'll get to Giddey too, but he turns into like Will Chamberlain when Vucevic is off the floor. Get like 16 boards. How is that possible for Giddey?
He was like skying for rebounds too. I don't know if you watch it, but he was like sky. I was like, dude, I didn't know Josh Giddey had ups. Like he was skying for these boards. It might only be when he's rebounding, because every other time he's on like a break, he just lays the ball in. And I'm like, dude, you got no hops and stuff. But when it comes to rebounding, he's like snatching that fucking thing. He just must have a nose for the ball.
You think when Paul asks people to come on his pod, he lets them know that he's questionable to show up on that day to record? He's like a 50-50 chance.
I don't know. You should tweet at him and ask him, DC. Maybe he'll respond and let you know. Hey, PG, just wanted to know, do you tell everyone you're questionable while you're doing the podcast the day of your game? But yeah, Giddey's been absolutely balling. We'll get to him, but I just had to say it because it was on my mind and we were talking about Philly. So, all right, next game here before we get to Chicago, OKC and Brooklyn. This is, obviously on the surface, you're going to hear OKC and Brooklyn. This game's in Brooklyn. Probably not the greatest game to target, DC, but the Brooklyn side, they're down a bunch of guys. Nick Claxton added to the injury list from the already a few guys that they were down. And that's going to open up minutes for Day'Ron Sharpe. Probably Trendon Watford could get a few more minutes as well, DC. And we've seen guys like Sharpe, when they're getting 25 plus minutes, play really well from a fantasy point per minute standpoint. So he's 4,200. Honestly, too, I like bigs against OKC. It's a bad spot from the standpoint that OKC probably blows them out, right, DC? It's like bad from that standpoint. But if you tell me Sharpe's going to play 25 minutes, which I think he's going to play no matter like blowout or anything else, I feel like he's a pretty good value.
Yeah. I did run the numbers today with Claxton off the court, Clowney off the court, Russell off the court, Cam Thomas off the court, no Simmons, no Schroeder, right? All these guys that have played for their team that they're missing. And the numbers for both Sharpe and Watford, who I assume Watford and Sharp are going to split those 48 center minutes in some way, right? I think it could just depend on who's playing better. But I do think the two of them are going to account for probably all 48. We don't know who's starting yet, or maybe we do. I think people are assuming it'll be Sharp.
Yeah, I think we're assuming Sharp.
Yeah, so 4,200 for him. Listen, he's at 243 minutes with the relevant guys off the court. You've got Sharp at 1.25 fantasy points per minute. If you put him at 25 minutes, you're talking over 30 there. So yeah, for 4,200 makes sense. Of course, the minutes aren't really secure, right? I mean, they could go a different direction. It's freaking Brooklyn. You never know what they're going to do. But yeah, I do think Sharp is a good play. For sure on a point per dollar basis. Is he a good play at 40% ownership? That I think is a tougher question to answer. And I'm not sure I want to go there. I mean, I think Brooklyn's going to get, blasted in this game, 17-point underdogs. I don't love the individual matchup for Sharp with some of the bigs down there for OKC. So, cash games, I think Sharp would be one of the first guys in, but I'm just not sure I want to play into what looks like it could be really, really high ownership with Sharp. That does concern me. But yeah, point per dollar wise, I'm not really arguing that. Other guys for Brooklyn, the only other guy I'm looking at here is Cameron Johnson, who hasn't really seen his minutes decline all that much. Has played 30-plus in 3 of the last 4, putting up some decent games. But again, you just, how well is Brooklyn going to play here? Probably not very. They're probably going to struggle offensively. I'm going to be careful getting too invested in Brooklyn. They're not a team I like to play normally, and I don't think you have to play them tonight. So I'll be careful with Brooklyn. And I don't honestly love the OKC side either. Fully healthy, I think they're going to blow them out here, and OKC is very apt to pull their guys early any chance they get, right, and get them some rest. So this is a game I'm going to be trying to have very little of, but obviously partly depends on what you're doing with the Brooklyn big men in particular.
Yeah, I mean, when you got like Daron Sharp is projecting to be like the highest scorer for Brooklyn fantasy point wise, and he's 4,200, like he's going to be pretty popular at that point, but I think, him, I agree with you. It kind of depends on how you're playing the game. Like if you just want to stay away from it because you think Brooklyn gets pounded, I think the only guy that should be in play is probably Sharp. Maybe Trent and Watford too, because I think both guys get their like 20-something minutes. But if you think somehow Brooklyn stays in this game, which I'm not saying they are, but if you do, SGA is going to drop 70. Like he's going to smash in that scenario. So it's probably unlikely. They probably blow Brooklyn out here in this spot, but you just never know. And I think with the studs that we have on this slate, DC, I would be willing to take a chance on an SGA tonight. Like I think it's one of those slates where, you know what, if SGA gets me 50 and they blow him out and he only plays 25 minutes, because listen, if they blow him out, SGA is still probably going to get 50. Like he's still like he might not get 60 or 70, but he's probably going to get 50. He's going to play like 27, 28 minutes because he always plays like the quarters, right, DC? So you're going to get like the 12 and 12 there, and then you'll get the couple. So he's going to play like, upper 20s regardless. Yeah. And that's in a blowout. And I do think he could still be okay. But if you somehow hit this game staying close, he's going to smash. So just due to the studs that we have on the slate, I'm going to keep him in play. I do think if I play him, though, I might play like maybe like a Keon Johnson and a Sharp or Trent and Watford and a Sharp together, like 2 Brooklyn guys and SGA, hoping somehow this game stays close. So that's kind of my take. Best play sharp, and I might have one of my 3 teams with SGA just because of the slate and what we have for studs. So no SGA though for you, DC. You're gonna stay away.
I mean, I'm not planning to play him, but if there's enough value, I don't have a problem going with that. I wouldn't play multiple Thunder on one team, but I have no problem playing one of them. I think that's fine. Yep.
I agree.
And yeah,
I don't like any of these other Thunder guys,
yeah,
to be honest with you.
I'm with you.
So, yeah. Let's see. Barnes is out. Okay, that's so we did get some news, DC, before we get to the next game. We did get TJ McConnell out, Tyrese Halliburton expected to play, and so Victor just said in the chat, I'm assuming Scotty Barnes is out. I'm looking for the update right now, but saying Scotty Barnes ruled out. Yep. Jakob Poeltl to play limited minutes. So, I mean, you can throw him out unless you think limited minutes is like 30 minutes or something like that. But that's some news for the slate, DC. I do think it makes the Toronto side very interesting. And, the Indiana side, I don't love as much. I think I like Miles Turner the most on the Indiana side. Does Tyrese Halliburton being in kind of what does that change for you from Indiana before we get to anything else? Do you like Andrew Nembhard still, or are you kind of like lower on the Pacers?
I'll have to look closer. I do think Halliburton himself is somewhat interesting. Gets a little bump with McConnell out, and like you said, I mean, there's not that many options or great options of studs to spend up on. Halliburton back to back 50 fantasy point games. He's also got that weird thing where he shoots way better from home. He is at home here in a good matchup against Toronto. So 8,200 for Halliburton, I think, is pretty good play. And then I have no problem with Nembhard either. You got to imagine he's going to get a bump. He's going to, get 30 minutes at 4,800 against Toronto. You could throw him in there. And then the Toronto guys, just running the numbers real quick. I mean, usage rates with Barnes off the court for Toronto. I mean, Barrett's at like 32%, quickly at 31%, Grady Dick at 25%. I mean, I mentioned those 3 guys. They're going to take up I think the vast majority of the offense now for Toronto. So
and then you're probably going to get a cheap guy starting, DC, which I don't know if you're going to want to play, but you're probably going to get a Akbaji, Jacoby Walters, tight play. They're 35 and 3,400. I assume one of those guys probably starts, right, for Scotty?
That would make sense. But I think with Toronto, I'm going to try to stick with those 3. Quickly, Barrett and Grady Dick. And then Indiana side, I kind of like Halliburton. He's grown on me a little bit. You can certainly play Miles Turner if you want to. What's the total in that game? It's got to be pretty high, right? 232. Yeah. He's decent. So, yeah, I like this game. Certainly, the Barnes news makes a big difference.
I like your Halliburton take, though. His price tag does seem pretty light at 8,200. Like that seems like a pretty good price tag for someone like him.
It seems like a pretty good floor ceiling combination on him tonight. It would seem like, right? Like I don't think he's going to have a terrible game here, and
And right now, the value that we have, I feel like we have more at the big position, the centers and stuff like that. I feel like there's more value. So you probably are going to naturally be spending up more at the guard position. But that's kind of how I've seen the slate so far. The news could change that, obviously. All right, let's get back to the last 7:30 game here. Atlanta and Miami. I just saw 2 news just popped in. He's on the court for pregame warm-up. So I assume that's looking good for someone like Bam, who is listed at questionable. And then, that's kind of the big news that we're waiting on from Miami. If Bam were to be out, I think that's a pretty big bump to wear. If Bam's in, I don't think I need to worry about, Khalil Ware. I probably won't love Bam either, to be honest with you. Andrew Wiggins has been playing really well, DC, but he's 6,600. He'd be more like a last piece in for me, but I do think he's at least in play the way he's been playing with Miami. He's been playing pretty good. And Tyler Hero, he has his ups and downs for sure, but he just had a bad game last game. 4 for 19 from the field, 3 for 9 from three, only 11 points, 25 fantasy points. But I do think that this is a stud that, he's going to also have the massive games. He had the 67 the game before that. And it was the back end of a back-to-back in against Atlanta. So maybe a bounce back game for Tyler Hero, DC. What do you think?
Yeah, these two teams just played 2 days ago on Monday, and they put up a total of like 185 points, something like that. And it's funny, the total for this one is 231. So they missed it by like 55.
Now, DC, just also both teams were on the back end of a back-to-back.
Still,
just throwing that out there.
Yeah. And obviously you see the poor shooting all around in that game, which obviously leads to but it still is interesting to see them playing the same game and have the total 55 points higher than they got to last game.
By the way, DC, Dyson Daniels, just another 7 steal game. I know steals don't mean anything, but, just another game where he has 7 steals. So,
Of course, of course, shorty guard JSU over there loves steals over blocks. All the
7 fucking steals in an NBA game. I mean, what are we talking about here? The guy's got like 200 steals.
You're not gonna find me talking bad about Dyson Daniels. So I'm with you. He's awesome.
He had 0 blocks because he was just stealing it left and right. He wasn't even going for blocks. He was going for he was picking pockets and jumping passing lanes and. Come on, Spaniard. He doesn't need to go for blocks. He's looking for those steals. I know, though. They're not as cool as blocks. I get it.
A lot depends on Bam, right? For Miami. I mean, I know you said he was that shoot around. I do think he looks likely to play, but if he did sit, I think Khalil Ware at that point would become a pretty awesome play. It would be a nice bump for Hero. I'm seeing Kyle Anderson projecting well. I assume that's with the assumption that Bam does not play, because I don't think I really want to play Kyle Anderson down there even at 3,400.
He got minutes last game. He got decent run last game, so I don't know how much I trust that. But
he got 28 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm probably not playing Kyle Anderson. I don't know. I don't love this one, especially with some of the news breaking toward playing those early players. What about you? You on this game, JSU?
Honestly, if Bam's in, I think like I said, like Hero and Wiggins, I think are the 2 guys that I'd have him play in Miami. I don't know how much of them I'll have, but I do think I'll at least keep them in my pool. And on the Atlanta side, we can't discount. I don't love the spot for like Dyson Daniels and Okongwu, but we can't discount the fact that he's 6,700 and he's been, putting up 41 and 49 his last 2 games. He's had, obviously a crap ton of stocks, 5 and 7 his last 2 games. So I do think he's a little better play over on the other site maybe than DraftKings, but he's the one guy that I'm going to at least keep in my pool, DC Dyson Daniels, just because he does have that stock upside for just a massive game. And if he ever adds that to a big scoring game, you could get like 50 plus. So, that's the one guy. I don't think I'm going to play though, like, the Niangs, the Richichets. I don't think it's the slate for this, at least in my 3 teams. Maybe in 150, you can, keep guys like that in your pool. Okongwu, if I was 150 and I'd keep him in the pool. So yeah, not a game though that I want to be like, over on.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. Clippers and Chicago Bulls here. This game, first game at 8. And our boy, Josh Giddey, 7,700, just absolutely smashing the last few games. He's like one-upped himself each game, DC. 58, 60, 62 fantasy points, just absolutely rolling. Like I said, was swatting the shit out of Philly at 3 blocks last game. 16 rebounds, 2 of the last 3 games is pretty wild. But it just shows DC, like, he's the type of player from a fantasy standpoint, guys that can kind of do a little bit of everything. They just have those massive ceiling outcomes, all the time, because if they're the ones going for the rebounds and they're setting people up and they're also looking to score, like you get that triple threat, you get the triple double bonus on DK, the double double bonus. He's just a guy that's going to be in the running for them when you lose a big piece or two, like Vucevic, who they were obviously down. They were also down Io last game. They're still down Pat Williams and Jalen Smith. So multiple injuries for Chicago. I think Josh Giddey, again, is a good spend. I played him on all my teams last time out. I don't know. I think I'm going to play him on most of my teams probably again. What are you doing with Giddey?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I mean, if you go 50, 60, and 58, 60, and 62, and you're still below 8K, you got to at least be in consideration, especially if the main guys are out that kind of help propel you to those big scores. So I don't think anyone has to play Giddey at 7,700. Price tag's getting up there. I get it. But I do think he is a good play once again. Should be, I assume, Zach Collins getting the start here again at center. Started last game against Philly, played 28 minutes, 31 fantasy points. Probably would have played some more. Got in, I think, a little early foul trouble, and then it was a blowout. The Bulls played so well. So I don't know how Zach Collins, it seems like every year this dude finds himself in a starting center position for like a couple weeks, but he mostly kind of gets the job done when it's his role with really no challengers, which is essentially what he's dealing with right now. So, I mean,
I will say one thing. I watched that entire game. There was a couple. First of all, he did get in early foul trouble. They mainly played him and Booz Ellis as bigs, and I don't know if it affected him too much from a minute standpoint. I did think it was weird that in the fourth quarter they were still running their starters out for a decent bit of the fourth quarter. So maybe instead of 28 minutes, DC plays 32 minutes in a full game or something like that, which is still a lot for someone at his price tag. And it's just another center that we can add into the cheap bucket, right? DC, we got Sharp, you had Drummond, now you got Collins. You can add into the cheap bucket of centers. I'm sure we'll get probably another one or two before the slate's over. The one thing about Collins, though, is he has a special knack for getting in foul trouble, real foul trouble too, not just 3 fouls. And obviously the fact that Philadelphia didn't have Joel Embiid, and then Yabusele got poked in the eye by Giddey at the beginning of the third quarter and left. They really had no bigs to attack Collins to actually get him into foul trouble. So he's a solid play. I don't know how I'd rank him with Sharp. I think I'd have Sharp slightly ahead of him, but that's just, me. I still think he's a fine play because I think the minutes are going to be here. I also like Booz Ellis, though. I like that they played mainly 2 bigs, DC. And, if the Clippers run with that Ben Simmons big lineup for some of the game without Zubac, I think the Bulls might try and match that up with Booz Ellis on the floor at the 5. So I kind of like him a little bit as well.
Did Booz Ellis? So Booz Ellis was playing the 5 when Collins was out for the most part. Is that what that's what you saw?
Yeah. Yep. Because they played Dalen Terry and Julian. I think it was Julian Phillips. They got 20-ish minutes.
Look at Booz Ellis. He played 36 minutes and was pulled due to the blowout with 6 minutes to go. He was going to play 41 minutes in that game.
I think he was the one that got a little bump from Collins getting in foul trouble early in the game. I think he was the one that got the slight bump.
It is interesting because the Clippers, obviously, they start Zubac, but behind him, I mean, they're playing some Simmons and Batum at centers. The center spot, perfect spots to potentially play, right? Booz Ellis, if the Clippers are rolling out Simmons or Batum. So yeah, I think I think Buzelis is a really interesting play. Yeah, I like that call.
Yep. Yeah. So I think for me, Giddey, Buzelis, Collins are like the three bulls that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And I think from the Clippers side, DC, I mean, you got Kawhi Leonard back, Ben Simmons in with Zubac. I think it's a good game for Zubac. I just wish Ben Simmons was out. I liked them last game. I'll probably just lean it to James Harden here, with Kawhi back if I play anyone, because it is a good matchup. The Bulls play fast.
And Chicago's going to have Zach Collins and Buzelis trying to protect the rim against Harden, who should be able to either get those guys in foul trouble or score it with ease, right? I would think.
He's going to get to the cup. He's going to get to the cup at will.
That's what I
He's going
to.
Yeah.
Bunch of layups for James Harden would be my guess in this one. But yeah, I like Harden too. Kawhi, I think, is a really good play at 7,200. Maybe not the most upside in the world, but really safe, I think, in this game. It's a weird thing to say about Kawhi Leonard, safe, but I do think it's a good spot for him. And then, yeah, Buzelis and Collins. It does look like if you're fading Collins, this is basically what I was addressing. It does seem like Buzelis' big games would, at least a large portion of them, would come at the expense of Collins, right? He gets in foul trouble. Buzelis gets to play the 5, get some more minutes, that type of thing. So I think you could play them together, but I think Victor's onto something here where separating them, Collins and Buzelis, that is, does make some sense to me.
I will say too, like I said, the starters got some run towards the end where most teams wouldn't have run their starters, I feel like. And Collins did knock down some buckets and get his fantasy point numbers up to that 30 mark. He was not there going into that fourth quarter. So, I mean, I do think they're cheap enough though, where you could play them. I don't think it's crazy to say like you could play Collins and Buzelis. Both guys are going to get run, but I do think the minutes upside could come from one of them being in foul trouble, forcing the other one on the floor. Mm-hmm. All right, that's the Clippers in Chicago. I know we got some news. Chat just let me know. Jaylen Brown looks like he is out.
Yeah,
I assume Sam Hauser's in. Kristaps. I was just gonna say, I assume Kristaps is in. All right, so just Brown out, DC. What does that do? Anything for you? Does that like kind of change Boston up a lot, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of what I expected is Brown to sit.
The
hard for me, at least with Boston, is it kind of seems like the usage gets kind of spread out, right? There's not, I don't think, like one super benefactor from Brown sitting, whereas everybody gets a little bit of a bump. You see it differently? Do you think there's one player that gets the huge bump here?
I mean, I think it'd be Tatum, honestly. Yeah. I guess, Peyton Pritchard, I do think he is still kind of hurt from Drew being in, like Drew and Derek. I like to play Pritchard when one of those guys are out, DC. But, they did start him in the second half of the last game, and he was rolling, though. So maybe it was a little bit of, he was hot, and they wanted to just let him keep going and stuff like that. Is he still 5,200? Is that still his price tag for Pritchard? 5,400. I think he's fine. I don't think you need it, though. I think it's probably Tatum. I just give the lean to.
You got the fresh Peyton Pritchard haircut going on there. So
I might just bet his overs again just for fun. I might just bet his overs again. So Peyton Pritchard, sneaky good rebounder. I will just say those rebounding props. Peyton Pritchard, sneaky good rebounder.
Here comes JSU for his size with every qualification.
Seven rebounds was like plus 500 or 600 on DK last night. I will just say, appreciate the giblets, DK. Appreciate them. So yeah, I like, some guards don't go for rebounds. He at least goes for him, DC. You got to know the the little guys that like to get in there and try and pull the boards out. That's my guy Peyton Pritchard. He's a feisty one, as we like to say. He's a feisty little guy. So wear his jersey tonight. Honestly, I feel ashamed to say this. I don't yet have a Peyton Pritchard jersey. I now that you say this though, I'm going to have to buy a Peyton Pritchard jersey because I do feel like I need one. He's slowly becoming one of my favorite players in the NBA. So DC, he's getting a lot better too, by the way. Like I know I joke, but he's gotten so much better as a hooper in the NBA. It's crazy.
I play a lot of Pritchard, so you're preaching to the choir here. But
yeah.
What?
All right.
What's the last NBA jersey you acquired before this new purchase of Pritchard coming down?
No, honestly, the jerseys. I'm not a big jersey guy, DC. So the few jerseys I have, I think the last one I got was a D'Angelo Russell Golden State Warriors jersey, and it was because DC he helped win me like 200K in DFS. Yeah. So I felt like I needed to it was like a crazy double OT game where like him and Draymond, I think I have Draymond's jersey too. Him and Draymond like combined for 130 or something stupid, like 120 or so. They both went for 60 pretty much, and just
when I ship this 888 on DraftKings tonight, thanks to Buzelis, his jersey is going to be hanging in my rafters.
You're going to have his jersey up there. So
right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So, all right. That's enough from the Boston side. Let's get back to the final two games on the slate. The 9:00 and 9:30 games here, Sacramento and Utah. Utah still down a few of their starters, Markkanen, Collins, Sexton, all out. But they do get back Clarkson. They get back Walker Kessler in this spot, DC. So not as much of a value spot as last time out. But what do you see here with Utah?
Yeah, Utah. It just seems like they're going to just like sit guys on rotation like the rest of the season. But for this game, Jesse, we do know obviously Sexton, Markkanen, and Collins out. So three big pieces. Digging into this one, I came away with Clarkson as who I think is the best play with Utah. Has been, when he's been in there, has played well recently. 30-plus fantasy points the vast majority of the time. We know he can get hot, go off. We know Sacramento definitely play some guard, so there should be plenty of minutes for Clarkson here. Jazz, one of those teams that I try to kind of avoid trusting their minutes if I can. So I'm not sure I'll end up with Clarkson. He is my favorite on the Jazz, though. Kessler would be second with no Collins. And I do think Keontae George is an okay play too, but 6,900 for him, getting up there in price tag a little bit. So Clarkson, the guy I like best for Utah. And then Sacramento, honestly, probably Sabonis would be the way I would go. But, I mean, they're fully healthy right now. They got Monk, Levine, DeRozan, Sabonis, a lot of mouths to feed with Sacramento. So, yeah, as it stands, not a game that I love here as we, kind of get toward the end of this slate.
Yeah, I mean, Zach LaVine, DeRozan, they got a lot of like similar type of guys, right? Just the straight scorer type, and we saw Zach LaVine go for the 53 last game. He went for 58 a couple games ago against New Orleans. So, he's got that big, upside type games in him, but he's also got the downside to him. I do think that makes him an interesting tournament play. I think he'd be the king I would leave in the pool, but I'm probably not going to be super high on the king side. I think the Utah side, it's Keontae George for me. And maybe you could play Walker Kessler, but I probably won't do it in my three teams. It would probably have to be like, 20 lineups or something. I could play a little Walker Kessler, but yeah, so I'm probably lower on this game in general, DC. I do like Kings games naturally, but I think this is one of the games that I'm just going to be low on. So hopefully goes one-sided and no one really gets there in the end. But yeah, not much on this game here, which is good because I feel like we've talked about a lot of the games on this slate. Like we like a lot of them. So got to have a few games that you take out. I do think this could be a potential good game. I just like the values and stuff for the price tags. I don't love, but all right. That's Sacramento and Utah. Pretty quick there. San Antonio and Houston, last game on the slate here, 9:30 lock. No Fred VanVleet again. Tari Eason out for Houston. So I would assume that puts Jabari Smith in the starting lineup, DC. And I do think he is cheap enough where he's in play. 5,500 for him. I think the Houston side's a little more intriguing than the Spurs side. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think I'm pretty much off the Spurs side of this one. I really don't see much. I'm not paying 8,800 for Fox right now. Castle, Paul, no thanks. The center or the big man situation's a mess. So yeah, Spurs. Things have probably gone poorly for me if I end up with Spurs on my lineup tonight, to be honest. So hoping not to get there. Houston, though, is interesting. You mentioned, of course, VanVleet out, Tari Eason out. Bigger news between the two, of course, is VanVleet means Amin Thompson will, kind of run the show here for Houston. Seems like a good spot for him against the Spurs, obviously, right? Or at least it does to me. Seems like he could have a big game here. He's actually been, I didn't realize this, horrendous against the Spurs on the season. 3 games and somehow averaging 16 fantasy points per game in those 3 games is Amin Thompson. I'm not sure what happened in those. Not that worried about that, but it is at least interesting. But I do like Thompson. I think you could play Jabari Smith at 5,500. Dylan Brooks, I play this guy he's like a last guy in for me fairly often just because the minutes are going to be there. He's always under 5K. You can get hot from 3, like we mentioned. Put up 37 fantasy points yesterday. People don't play him that often. So Dylan Brooks, I think, is a totally fine play. Again, not the first guy in my lineup, but no problem ending up there. Even Sengun you could play, right, against a Spurs team that's really lacking on the interior. So Houston looks good to me. I think this is a team you can go to for this last game of the night.
Stevers, I know when someone is just trying to get on my nerves in the chat. I know when you're trying to poke at me a little bit. Don't poke the bear right now, okay? We made it this whole way.
You think AI is better than CP3?
I know AI is better than CP3.
I'm on the CP3.
First of all, CP3 is one of the dirtiest guys to play in the NBA. He was dirty. He was dirty in college. He's dirty.
Why do we have to bring this up? We're going to be here another hour now.
First of all, I see Stevers did it on purpose. I know what he's doing. So Stevers, you just poked me too much, and now I got to go. No, Chris Paul is not the greatest 5'11" player of all time. It is Allen Iverson, greatest 5'11" player of all time. It's not even close to. Get out of here with the Chris Paul stuff. Dirty as Chris Paul is like a little bit better of a Draymond Green. All right. Dirty as fuck, but really good at what they do. Yeah. Allen Iverson was a straight hooper. Okay. Totally different type of players. Totally different.
We need baseball gear, so I don't have to hear anything more about Allen Iverson. I've heard enough for one season.
I didn't even bring him up, DC. It was the chat. Okay. They did it on purpose. It was our guy, Stevers.
Don't blame the chat. The chat can be ignored.
I'm blaming Stevers. It's Stevers' fault. I blame Stevers. That's it. Sure. Chris Paul's listed at 6 feet. Oh, he's not even in the club then. There's no way Chris Paul's 6 feet.
No way.
No way. Absolutely no way. Yeah, that's right. Jake, tell him Allen Iverson crossed up MJ that one time. I remember it too. All right, so back to this game here. Houston's definitely the side I like, and I think there's a few plays. I mean, you talked about Amen. The one thing I worry about with Amen is I feel like on every back end of a back-to-back with Amen Thompson, he always lets me down. I feel like I played him multiple times on the back end of back-to-back, and he's had very bad performances. But they've been also off of like really good performances. So I'm wondering if that has maybe a little to do with it. But I do think Şengün is a really good play as a spend. I think if you're trying to get different too on this slate, naturally with a bunch of good value centers on this slate, if you decided to spend up at center or even double spend at center, I think you're going to end up being very unique here on this slate. So I do like that as a contrarian strategy. And I think Şengün's one of my favorite spend up centers on the entire slate. Just kind of looking at, the guys that I can spend up for at center. Obviously, you had Sabonis in the other game, which I'm not as high on that game, even though you obviously can spend up for him. I think Şengün DC is probably my favorite spend up guy at the center position. I like Miles Turner in the mid range, but you didn't really bring him up. Do you not like Şengün in this spot?
No, I do like Şengün quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in on Şengün. Yep.
Yeah, and then you brought up Jabari Smith. I like Jabari. I think Jalen Green, he's been really hot, especially from three. The last 3 games, he's been crushing it. So those are the 3 guys, I think, for me, DC. Şengün, Jabari, and Jalen Green. I think I could play 2 of them. I don't think I'll play all 3 on the same lineup, but I think I could play 2 of those guys comfortably and then, go from there. So, yeah.
Kevin with comment of the day. Big T is on shower number 6 for the day. Just out of the blue, I believe the first comment that Kevin has made in chat all day here at the end of the show, and a banger. So yeah, congratulations, Kevin. You're the champion today.
Yeah, love that. Big T on shower number 6 for the day. I still can't believe that somebody showers that often in you can't just chill, even if you're a little sweaty for like a little bit. Like you just got to jump back in the shower. That was pretty wild. But all right, that's enough here. That's all 9 games on the slate. DC, let's give our plays of the day. Hopefully mine doesn't declare himself out after lock because that would be pretty annoying again. But we'll try. Round 2 here, DC, for myself. But who you got here? Who's the mom's basement play of the day?
Toronto-Indiana game looks good to me with Scotty Barnes out. I'll go with RJ Barrett. Puts up a big game for the Raptors.
I like that. Honestly, I want to go in the same game.
Join me.
Because I do think that game is very interesting now. I'm going to go with Mr. Quickly, Emmanuel Quickly, 7K. He's been very good. Just had a bad shooting spot last time out, but 6 rebounds, 7 assists. He's been very active on the boards, getting guys involved since he's been back. And again, just one bad shooting night. Think he turns it back tonight. If this game stays close, you got to feel like Quickly and Barrett are doing work for this game to stay close. So, I'm going to go with Mr. Quickly, 7K. And I can play both of them together. It's definitely one of those spots where you can jam both those guys at those price tags. So I like it. Play those guys together and finish out those builds. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the show. RPS 15, still the promo code if you want 15% off your weekly or monthly payment. Check us out. All sports. Like I said, baseball's coming up. DC getting his baseball rankings all set up. He'll have that up probably by the end of the week, mainly for best ball on DK, but you can use it if you play season long and stuff like that. If you're into MLB, and we got golf's locking tomorrow morning. Those guys will have all the golf content covered at Rumpier Sports, and we got to get the hoops content all up for you guys tonight. So we'll see you guys tomorrow for Draft Sheet and myself, JSU. Good luck in your DraftKings contest. We're out of here.